You know, headphones and loudspeakers are just everywhere. We use them for music, calls, podcasts like this one, literally everything. They're so common, we often just take them completely for granted, almost like air.
Exactly. They're just there. We tend to, yeah, take them for granted. But what if digging into how they actually work, the engineering and acoustic science behind them, could genuinely change how you listen? Maybe even how you approach music itself.
Right.
These aren't simple gadgets. They're complex tools, each designed with a really specific job in mind.
And those design choices, they directly impact what hits your ears, don't they? So I guess that's our mission today on this deep dive, to pull back the curtain a bit on headphones and loudspeakers.
Yeah, let's explore what makes them tick, how they're different, how they're built, their unique strengths, and maybe surprisingly, some weaknesses you might not even consider.
Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, to truly getting clued in about these devices, moving you from just hearing sound to really listening with intention.
That's a perfect way to frame it. So, where should we start? Let's dive into let's say, the intimate world of headphones first.
Okay, yeah. What's their unique angle as a monitoring tool? How does that listening experience really differ from speakers?
Well, headphones offer this incredibly intimate perspective. Their biggest strength is definitely the sheer detail they reveal. They let you zoom right in, almost put a magnifying glass on the sound.
Zoom in how? Like, what kind of detail are we talking about that maybe you wouldn't get elsewhere?
Okay, so imagine spotting tiny, subtle issues in a recording. Things like a barely audible background hum, maybe some low-level noise, or even electrical interference.
Ah, I see. Stuff that might just vanish or get lost if you're listening on big speakers in a room, maybe.
Precisely. It gets masked by the room's own sound, the acoustics, or just the overall scale of the sound coming from the speakers. So for engineers and musicians, headphones are absolutely critical for catching those little gremlins,
Yeah.
the things that can mess up a mix down the line. They're kind of your first line of defense.
That makes perfect sense. But they aren't flawless, are they? What are some of their limitations, especially when you get into critical tasks like mixing? I've often heard people say that mixes done only on headphones can feel a bit, I don't know, dry. Is that a common thing?
That's a very common observation, yeah. While they excel at detail, the soundstage on headphones can feel quite different. It's often perceived as drier, like you said, and sometimes even wider than it might actually be on speakers. And crucially, they're generally not the right tool for accurately judging front-to-back depth in a mix, that spatial dimension. It's incredibly tricky on headphones.
So you can't really tell how deep a mix sounds, like how far back instruments are, just using headphones?
Not reliably, no. And this is where using headphones with speakers becomes really powerful. You can strategically pick a pair of headphones to complement or, balance out your speaker's weaknesses.
How so? Can you give us an example of that?
Absolutely. So for instance, if your speakers tend to be a bit muddy or unclear in the high frequencies, you might choose some bright sounding headphones. They'll help you really hear and clean up what's happening up there. Or on the flip side, if your speakers are a bit thin in the low end, headphones with really good deep bass response can give you that crucial insight into what's happening down there, the stuff you might be missing.
Okay. Using one to check the other, leveraging their individual strengths, that's clever. And it sounds like even the type of headphone matters a lot here, too.
It totally does, yeah. When we talk about types, the two main categories really relate to the ear cups. Are they closed or are they open? Let's dig into those. First, we have open back headphones. These have vented or perforated ear cups. Sound can pass pretty freely in and out, their biggest pro. A more natural, expansive, sort of airy stereo image. It feels much closer to listening to speakers in a room. You get this sense of space and air around the instruments. This makes them really preferred for critical mixing and detailed listening. That wider soundstage and fewer internal resonances lead to a cleaner, more accurate sound. Plus, they're generally more comfortable for long sessions because of that airflow. Your ears don't feel so boxed in.
Okay, sounds great, but what's the downside?
The main con is zero isolation. Sound leaks out. External noise leaks in. So they're totally unsuitable for recording with sensitive microphones, like imagine your click track spilling into a vocal mic. Nightmare. They're best used in quiet environments for mixing or maybe just focused, casual listening. And one more thing, many high-end open backs have high impedance. Think Sennheiser HD650s, ATH-R70X, DT990s. They often need a dedicated headphone amplifier to really drive them properly and get the best sound. Just something to be aware of.
Right, need enough power. Okay, so what about the other main type?
Then you've got closed-back headphones. These have sealed ear cups that completely enclose your ears. Their big advantage is superior isolation from outside noise. And crucially, they stop sound from escaping outward. This makes them absolutely ideal for tracking situations, recording a vocalist, maybe a drummer who needs that backing track cranked loud without it bleeding into the mics. They also tend to deliver strong, punchy bass because of that sealed chamber.
Okay, good for isolation and bass punch. What are the cons there?
Well, on the downside, they can be heavier, sometimes hotter on the ears. The clamping force might be tighter, which can lead to discomfort over long sessions. Sonically, they often have a more close-in or narrower soundstage. The music can sometimes feel like it's coming from inside your head, if that makes sense. And that enclosed space can create internal reflections that might slightly color the sound, maybe giving it a bit of a boxy tone sometimes. So for those reasons, critical mixing engineers often avoid relying solely on closed backs for the final mix decisions.
Makes sense. And you mentioned a third type briefly, IEMs.
Right, in-ear monitor, or IEMs, tiny earpieces that fit right into your ear canal. Originally designed for live performers on stage, they're pros. Extreme portability, obviously. And really excellent passive noise isolation, often matching or even beating closed backs. Some can block up to 37 decibels of noise. Super useful for, say, drummers or vocalists who might wear them under ear defenders. They also give really consistent sound delivery because they're less affected by head movement. And while they started on stage, they're gaining serious traction in studios now for mixing and mastering. Some high-end models are said to match or even outperform full-sized headphones.
Wow, that's a fantastic breakdown. Okay, so understanding those differences, let's talk practical studio stuff. Headphone mixes during recording sessions, why are they so vital?
Oh, they are absolutely critical, yeah. Think about a larger session, maybe multiple musicians in different rooms or booths, singer in isolation, guitarist in the live room, drummer somewhere else.
Right, different spaces, completely different needs for what they need to hear.
Exactly. You can't just send the same mix to everyone. The engineer in the control room hears one thing, but each musician needs something tailored specifically for them, for their role, for their comfort.
Tailored how? Is it just about turning things up or down for them?
Levels are a huge part of it, yeah. A drummer might need that click track cranked way up, right?
Yeah.
But maybe the guitarist doesn't want to hear it at all. And singers. Singers almost always need to hear their own voice much louder in the mix than anyone else does. It helps them stay on pitch, feel confident, deliver a better performance. It's huge for them.
That makes total sense. Are there other tricks besides just tweaking levels for a headphone mix? Any little secrets?
Oh, definitely. A really common one is adding just a touch of reverb only to the headphone mix,
Yeah.
especially for singers. It makes the sound feel less artificial, less awkward. Hearing your totally dry voice isolated in your ears can be really off-putting and unnatural. A little reverb adds a sense of space, makes it feel more like singing in a real room.
Ah, so it simulates a bit of an acoustic environment for them. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's really clever how a small detail can make such a big difference to how someone performs.
It truly can. It massively impacts their comfort and ultimately the quality of the take they give you. And speaking of communication and comfort in the studio, the talkback system, that mic the engineer uses to talk to the musicians, that's another crucial element to handle carefully.
Right, because you got to be careful not to let the musicians accidentally hear something from the control room they weren't meant to, don't you? Like some chatter.
Oh, you have to be extremely careful, like a casual complaint about a take that wasn't great, or maybe an off-the-cuff joke that falls flat, or even just an audible sigh of frustration from the control room. I've genuinely heard stories where something like that completely soured the mood in the session. It can even damage relationships long-term.
Wow. So it's partly about psychology, too, not just pure audio engineering.
Totally. The studio environment is surprisingly delicate. You have to manage the vibe.
Okay, so we've had this really close-up, microscopic look with headphones, but to get the full picture, we need to pull back, right? Step into the more expansive world of studio monitors or loudspeakers. These are really seen as the gold standard, aren't they? The main reference point in most studios.
Without a doubt, yeah. Studio monitors are generally considered the most consistent and important reference point for judging recordings, making mixed decisions, mastering, all of it. You need that reliable baseline. And near-field monitors are particularly common. The smaller ones you usually see sitting on the console or on stands nearby. The whole idea with near-fields is that you listen relatively close to them, maybe 3 to 5 feet away. So the sound you hear is dominated by the direct sound from the speaker, not so much the reflections bouncing around the room.
So that minimizes the room's acoustic influence, giving you a clearer, more, unadulterated picture of the mix itself.
It certainly helps, yeah. It limits the room's effect quite a bit, which gives you a better idea of how the mix might translate to typical consumer systems, bookshelf speakers, car stereos, that kind of thing.
But it doesn't totally eliminate the room's impact, right? Or guarantee the mix sounds good everywhere else.
No, absolutely not. Even near fields are affected by the room to some degree. And there's just such a massive variety of playback systems out there in the world. No single monitor setup can perfectly predict how your mix will sound on absolutely everything. It's always a balancing act.
Right, you can't control every listener's setup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of ideals, I've heard this term thrown around, the infinite baffle. What on earth is that? It sounds very theoretical.
It is very theoretical. It's a classic concept in acoustics. Imagine taking a loudspeaker driver, just the cone part, and mounting it completely flat onto a board or baffle that is infinitely large and perfectly rigid.
Okay. Why would we even imagine something like that? What problem is it trying to solve?
Well, it addresses a fundamental problem, especially with low frequencies, with bass. When a speaker cone moves forward, it compresses the air in front of it. When it moves back, it creates a vacuum, a low-pressure area behind it. At low frequencies, where the sound waves are really long, if there's nothing blocking the path, that compressed air from the front can just rush around the edge of the speaker to fill the vacuum at the back, and vice versa. They end up canceling each other out to some extent.
Ah, so the sound wave kind of short circuits itself, so you lose bass energy projecting forward.
Precisely. The infinite baffle, being instantly large, completely prevents this pressure equalization around the driver. So theoretically, it would allow the speaker to radiate low frequencies perfectly without that cancellation. It's a theoretical ideal, not a practical design you can build. But the underlying principle is why engineers sometimes flush mount speakers directly into a solid wall to create a much larger, more effective baffle and get closer to that ideal.
Okay, interesting. So back in the real world, we have speaker cabinets, basically boxes. These must create their own set of problems compared to that infinite ideal.
They absolutely do, those finite edges of the cabinet. They become, in a way, like tiny secondary sound sources themselves. As the sound wave from the main driver wraps around the edge of the cabinet, the edge itself radiates sound. But it's slightly out of phase with the main driver's sound, especially at higher frequencies. This phenomenon is called diffraction.
Out of phase, so it interferes, causing cancellations or peaks in the sound.
Exactly. It results in ripples, unevenness in the frequency response. The cabinet edges essentially color the sound in ways you don't want. It's a major challenge in speaker design, trying to minimize or control that diffraction effect through the cabinet shape. Maybe using rounded edges, careful material choices, and it all plays a role.
It's amazing how much just the box itself matters. And placement too, right? You mentioned near field sitting on a console. Can just plopping them down like that cause issues?
Oh, big time. If you put monitors directly on a hard, reflective surface, like a console meter bridge or just a desk, without any kind of isolation underneath, you can get something called comb filtering. Some of the sound energy actually travels through the console structure or the desk, and it reaches your ears slightly delayed compared to the direct sound coming straight from the speaker cone.
Delayed sound. More phase problems again.
Yep. Causes cancellations and peaks in the frequency response, particularly noticeable in the low-mid frequencies. It just muddies up the sound. They call it comb filtering because if you looked at a frequency response graph, the sharp peaks and deep nulls would look like the teeth of a comb. It makes your sound really uneven and unclear. The solution is decoupling.
Decoupling, what does that actually involve or doing?
It basically means putting some kind of soft, absorbent material underneath the speakers. You see those specialized foam pads or sometimes dense rubber stands? It isolates the speaker cabinet from the surface it's sitting on, stops those vibrations from transferring through the structure and creating those problematic delayed reflections.
Okay, simple fix, but clearly an important one. What about actually building speakers into the wall, flush mounting, as you mentioned earlier? Is that generally a good idea?
Yeah, that can be a really good approach.
Yeah.
Like we said, it creates a much larger effective baffle, getting you closer to that infinite baffle ideal. And it basically eliminates diffraction from the front edges of the speaker cabinet entirely, which is a big win.
That sounds almost like a perfect solution then. Are there any potential downsides or things to watch out for?
Well, there can be. Some speakers are actually designed expecting to be freestanding in a room. They might have a built-in bass boost in their internal EQ to compensate for how bass naturally rolls off when a speaker is away from walls. It's called baffle step compensation. So if you take that speaker and flush mount it, you could end up with way too much bass because you've essentially given it boundary reinforcement and it still has its built-in boost. Luckily, many modern active monitors, the ones with amplifiers built in, have EQ switches or settings specifically to compensate for this, letting you adjust the bass response for flush mounting.
Good to know you can usually adjust for that. Okay, so we've got the speaker, the cabinet, the placement. What about actually driving the speaker? Amplifiers clearly play a huge role. There's this term I hear, damping factor. What's that all about?
Damping factor is absolutely critical for speaker control. Think of it as the amplifier's ability to grip and control the speaker cone's movement, like really tightly. High-performance solid-state amps typically achieve a high damping factor by using clever design, often involving negative feedback, to get a very, very low output impedance, like close to 0 ohms.
Okay, and how does that low output impedance relate to damping the speaker cone?
Right. So a low output impedance means the amplifier presents very little resistance to any electrical current generated by the speaker cone itself as it moves back and forth due to its own inertia. This happens especially right after the musical signal stops. The speaker actually acts like a tiny electrical generator at that moment. A high damping factor, which results from that low amp output impedance, effectively short-circuits this back current from the cone. It stops the cone dead in its tracks the instant the signal ends. Think of it like an incredibly responsive brake system for your speaker cone.
So it prevents the cone from just sort of wobbling around on its own momentum after the note should have actually stopped.
Exactly that. It prevents what engineers call ringing or overhang. This stop-on-a-dime control is absolutely vital for achieving tight, clean bass and really sharp, accurate transient sounds. Think crisp drum hits or plucked strings.
That's a really clear explanation, thanks. So beyond that precise cone control, what are some of the other core design elements that go into building a truly professional studio monitor? Seems like a lot.
It's fascinating, yeah, how many different pieces have to come together perfectly.
No.
First, obviously, you have the drivers themselves. These are the actual components making the sound. You've got your classic cone drivers for woofers and mid-ranges, dome tweeters for high frequencies, often made of silk or metal. But then you also have more specialized designs like ribbon drivers or air motion transformers, AMTs, or even large electrostatic panel drivers. Each has its own sonic characteristics, its own strengths and weaknesses.
So different driver types give you different sonic flavors, or is it more about technical performance?
It's really both. Each type excels in different areas, maybe detail, maybe power handling, maybe how quickly they respond to the signal. Then think about the enclosures. We talked about the infinite baffle, but real-world designs are usually either datify. Sealed boxes, these tend to offer tight, well-damped bass with a smooth, predictable roll-off at the low end. Or bass reflex designs, which are the ones with a port or a vent. These are super common. They allow for deeper bass extension from a given cabinet size, which is efficient, but they can sometimes have minor trade-offs in phase accuracy or transient response compared to sealed boxes.
Okay. And what about something called crossovers? How do they fit into all this?
Crossovers are absolutely crucial. They're basically electronic filter networks that split the incoming audio signal into different frequency bands. They send the low frequencies to the woofer, the high frequencies to the tweeter, maybe mid-frequencies to a mid-range driver if it's a three-way speaker. They can be passive, meaning they sit between the power amplifier and the drivers using capacitors and inductors, or they can be active, which work at line level before the amplification stage. Active crossovers are generally more precise and are very common in modern studio monitors. They allow each frequency band to have its own dedicated amplifier channel, which offers a lot more control and optimization possibilities.
That makes sense, splitting the job up before amplification. And I'm guessing all this clever technology, the drivers, the enclosures, the crossovers, it can all be totally undermined if the room acoustics and placement aren't right.
Oh, absolutely. This is probably the most crucial factor for getting good results from monitors. Your room is part of the system. Reflections off walls, ceilings, floors, they cause peaks and nulls in the frequency response at your listening position. Standing waves, especially at low frequencies, can lead to horrible bass boom or complete cancellation in certain spots. So proper speaker distance from walls, either pulling them out sufficiently or maybe flush mounting them correctly and getting the height and angle right. Usually tweeters at ear level, speakers forming an equilateral triangle with your head maybe towed in about 60 degrees. All vital for finding that optimal sweet spot where the sound is most accurate and balanced.
So even the best monitors in a bad room will give you a bad listening experience. What about calibration and listening levels? Does our own hearing play tricks on us there?
It certainly does. Human hearing isn't linear. Our perception of frequencies changes significantly with volume. That's described by the famous Fletcher-Munson curves, or equal loudness contours. Because of this, it's really important to calibrate your monitors and mix at moderate, consistent levels, usually somewhere in the 75 to 85 dB SPL range is recommended. This ensures more consistent frequency perception. And just as importantly, it protects your hearing during long sessions. Also, a quick whisper test, listening at very low volumes can sometimes reveal crucial balance issues, like whether the vocal is truly sitting right, that you might miss when things are louder.
That raises a good point. Why do studios often have multiple sets of speakers? You see the big main monitors, the near field, sometimes even little cube speakers. Seems like one really good pair should be enough.
Yeah, it seems logical, but because no single monitor system is perfect or represents every possible playback scenario, studios use multiple references. You have your primary near fields for most of the detailed work, maybe larger main monitors, often built into the wall, for checking the full frequency range at higher levels, getting a sense of power and impact. And often, yes, a small, limited bandwidth grot box speaker, like the classic Oratone cubes or similar. These simulate lo-fi playback systems, old car radios, cheap TVs to ensure the mix still holds together, and key elements are audible even under poor conditions. Cross-referencing between all of these, plus headphones, is absolutely essential for judging how well your mix will translate to the outside world.
And related to translation, I've heard about checking mono compatibility. Why is that still so important in a world that seems mostly stereo?
It's still essential because mono playback happens more often than you might think. Many phone speakers are mono, or effectively mono. Lots of club PA systems sum the signal to mono. Some Bluetooth speakers, background music systems, even some broadcast situations. If you have phase cancellation issues between your left and right channels, maybe from using certain stereo widening effects carelessly or problematic mic placements, certain frequencies or even whole instruments might partially or completely disappear when the signal is summed to mono. You need to catch that early, otherwise your mix could fall apart on those systems.
Right, don't want your lead vocal vanishing on someone's phone. And finally, what about managing the really deep stuff? Low frequency management, particularly with subwoofers.
Good point. Many near-field monitors, especially smaller ones, simply can't reproduce the very lowest octave of human hearing accurately, say below 40 hertz or so. So subwoofers are often added to the system specifically to extend that low-end response so you can hear and judge what's happening down in the sub-bass region. However, getting them integrated properly is key. Ensuring the level is right, that the phase alignment between the sub and the main monitors is correct. And careful placement is absolutely critical because low frequencies interact with room modes so strongly. It's actually quite easy to get way too much bass or uneven bass if the sub isn't set up and positioned carefully in the room.
Okay, wow. After covering all of that incredible detail on both sides, it really feels like the big takeaway is you can't just rely on headphones or speakers alone, can you? Not if you want a mix that works everywhere.
No, absolutely not. Not if you want the full picture. That's really the core message here, I think. They are truly complementary tools. They're not competing against each other. Neither one by itself tells you everything you need to know about your mix. Neither guarantees it will sound right out in the real world. You absolutely need the headphone's microscopic forensic detail spotting ability for those hard-to-find imperfections, for isolation during tracking, and you equally need the speaker's sense of space, of depth, that real-world interaction with room acoustics, the physical impact of bass, using them together, checking back and forth. That provides the most comprehensive view. It's all about the synergy between them.
And this all ties back beautifully to that idea we started with, about listening with intention.
Absolutely. It's about consciously choosing why you're reaching for the headphones right now, or why you're switching over to the speakers. What specific quality are you trying to judge at this moment? Are you hunting for clicks and pops, checking the width of your stereo image, judging the overall tonal balance, assessing the bass impact in a physical space? Understanding their individual strengths and weaknesses just makes you a much more effective and critical listener.
Okay, let's really drill down into some specific challenges of mixing just on headphones then. Because despite all their advantages for detail, they do present some significant hurdles if you're trying to make final mix decisions on them, right?
They absolutely do. Big ones. The first major one is what some people call the low-end lie. See, when you're in a room with speakers, you don't just hear the bass. You feel it. Those deep frequencies vibrate your chest, your gut, maybe the floor beneath you. That physical sensation is actually a crucial part of how we judge low-end energy and balance. On headphones, that physical sensation is completely gone. You only get the auditory information. This often leads to engineers unintentionally overboosting the low end in their headphone mixes because they're trying to compensate for that missing physical impact, trying to hear the power they can't feel.
Ah, okay, so how do you combat that? How do you get the bass right on headphones?
Several ways. First, use visual aids. Spectrum analyzers are your friends. Keep an eye on the low frequency range, maybe 20 to 60 hertz. Compare what you see in your mix to what you see in well-mixed commercial reference tracks. And for a real game changer, there are tactile transducer systems, like the SubPack. It's a wearable device like a vest or a seat cushion that translates low-end audio frequencies into physical vibrations you can actually feel through your body. It gives you back some of that missing haptic feedback.
Wow, feeling the bass from your headphones. Okay, what's another big headphone mixing trap?
The next big one is stereo image distortion, sometimes called the inside your head problem. Here's the thing. Headphones completely bypass the natural acoustic crosstalk or crossfeed that happens when you listen to speakers in a room. With speakers, your left ear hears the left speaker directly, but it also hears a slightly delayed, slightly quieter version of the sound from the right speaker, and vice versa. Our brain uses that information for spatial localization. With headphones, each ear only hears its dedicated channel in almost total isolation. This makes sounds panned dead center often feel like they're originating inside your skull, not out in front. And sounds panned hard, left or right, can sound artificially wide or disconnected. This makes judging panning moves accurately really difficult, and can often lead to mixes that sound too narrow or flat, lacking depth, when you finally play them back on speakers.
Right, that inside your head feeling is definitely weird. What are the solutions there?
Well, open-back headphones can help a little, because they naturally allow some sound to leak and cross over. But the real solution usually involves using cross-feed simulation plugins. Software like Goodhertz, Can Opener Studio, or Waves, and others, they digitally simulate the acoustic environment of listening to speakers in a room. They subtly blend a small amount of the left channel into the right, and vice versa, with appropriate filtering and delay. This helps create a more natural, speaker-like stereo image within the headphones, making it much easier to judge panning and depth in a way that translates better later.
Okay, cross-feed plugins. That's clever. And what about just the physical strain?
Right, the third big one, ear fatigue. Mixing on headphones generally causes ear fatigue much more quickly than listening to speakers at a similar perceived loudness. It's due to the sound being delivered so directly and constantly to your eardrums, with no natural reflections or variations. Plus, there's often a tendency to turn headphones up louder over time without realizing it. This not only increases the risk of hearing damage long-term, but in the short term, tired ears lead to skewed perception and bad mix decisions. Things start sounding dull, so you boost highs, or you misjudge levels.
Yeah, can't mix well if your ears are tired. How do you manage that?
You have to work smart. First, maintain moderate listening levels. Again, that 75-85 dB SPL range is a good target. Use an SPL meter app on your phone if you need to check. Second, take frequent breaks. Seriously, get up, walk away for 5 or 10 minutes every hour. Give your ears a reset. Using open-back headphones can also help reduce fatigue somewhat as they feel less claustrophobic. And here's a neat trick I like, the step-away rule. Occasionally, take your headphones off, place them on the desk in front of you like tiny little speakers, and listen to your mix at a low volume from that distance. Gives you a surprisingly different perspective on the balance.
Those are some really practical tips for dealing with the inherent challenges. So, moving beyond just coping, how do the pros truly elevate their headphone mixing game? What are some critical techniques they use to get pro-level results primarily on cans?
This is where it gets really interesting. It becomes less about the specific headphones and more about smart workflow and using the right tools. First and foremost, calibration is king. We have to accept that every single pair of headphones has its own unique sound signature, its own coloration or frequency response curve. None are perfectly flat right out of the box, no matter how expensive. Calibration software, SonarWorks Sounded Reference, is probably the best known, but there are others. Measures your specific headphone's response and creates a correction EQ curve. Applying this correction digitally gives you a much more accurate, neutral, flat listening environment. This is absolutely fundamental if you want your mix decisions made on headphones to translate reliably to other systems. It removes the headphone's bias from the equation.
Okay, so get your headphones calibrated first. What's next?
Next, and this is non-negotiable, reference tracks are your North Star. This is crucial for any mixing, but perhaps even more so when you're primarily on headphones because you lack the external context of a room. You need benchmarks. Choose commercially released tracks in a similar genre to what you're working on, tracks that you know sound great on a wide variety of systems. Consistently A/B compare your work-in-progress mix against these references, and crucially, always level match them carefully. Your brain is easily fooled, louder almost always sounds better initially. Match the perceived loudness before you compare. Pick maybe 2 or 3 relevant references, maybe even one from a slightly different genre, just to check overall loudness, punch, and clarity standards.
Level-matched referencing. Got it. What else?
Okay, here's a powerful diagnostic technique, sometimes called the Dave Pensado filter trick, after the great mix engineer. This will literally train your ears over time. You put an EQ plugin on your master bus with just a high-cut filter engaged. Start with the cutoff frequency set really low, like maybe 30 or 40 hertz, so you're only hearing the deep sub-bass. Listen to your mix, then switch to your level-matched reference track, listening only to that same low band. Then slowly raise the cutoff frequency of the filter, maybe 200 hertz, then 250 hertz, 500 hertz, 1 kilohertz, and so on, stopping at each increment to compare your mix to the reference within that specific frequency band. This forces you to critically analyze specific zones, low end, the low mids, the mid-range, the upper mids, the top end in isolation. It's incredibly effective at revealing balance problems or frequency buildup issues you'd otherwise completely miss. It's like giving your ears frequency-specific superpowers.
Wow, that sounds intense, but really insightful, like dissecting the mix band by band against a pro track. Okay, one more technique.
Lastly, let's talk about EQ match. This is a feature found in some advanced EQ plugins like FabFilter Pro Q3 or tools within Isotope Ozone. It allows the plugin to analyze the overall frequency spectrum of a source track reference and then analyze your own mix. It then generates a corrective EQ curve, showing the difference. Basically, the EQ needs to make your mix's overall tonal balance closer to the reference. Now, you can use this in 2 main ways. There's the lazy boss approach. Just slap that generated curve onto your mix bus for a quick tonal adjustment. It can work surprisingly well sometimes. Or there's the much more beneficial mastermind approach. Learn from the curve. Analyze what the EQ match is suggesting. Is it boosting lows, cutting mids around 500 hertz, adding air? Then remove the Match EQ plugin and go back into your mix to make those kinds of adjustments manually on the individual tracks or buses. This way you're not just relying on the tool, you're using it to train your ear and understand why the reference sounds the way it does, ultimately making you a much better mixer yourself.
Using the tech to train your own skills, that's smart. Okay, so pulling it all together.
Yeah, so if we connect this all back, headphones and studio monitors are fundamentally indispensable tools. Each has these really unique strengths, right? Headphones give you that incredible microscope into the sound, the fine details, the noise floor, the edits, plus isolation, which is invaluable for tracking and focused listening. Monitors, on the other hand, provide the macro view, how the music breathes in open air, how the stereo field really plays out in front of a listener, that physical sensation of bass. They're crucial for balancing mixes in a way that feels right in a real space. Neither one is perfect on its own.
Exactly. So the truly savvy audio engineer, or even just the critical listener, uses both. They leverage those complementary advantages, headphones for the surgical detail, monitors for the real-world perspective, and feel specifically to overcome the limitations inherent in either one alone. It really is about combining those perspectives for the full picture.
Absolutely. And this all loops back perfectly to that initial idea we discussed. Listening with intention. Understanding these characteristics, knowing why you're choosing one tool over the other at any given moment, just makes you a vastly more effective listener, whether you're actually making the music or just deeply appreciating it. And maybe here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given that our brains are constantly trying to place reproduced sound, whether from speakers or headphones, into a believable physical space, essentially creating an illusion, how much of what we perceive in a really well-crafted mix is actually real, like a faithful capture of performance in a room, and how much is actually a very clever manipulation by engineers who understand psychoacoustics and are deliberately playing on our brain's innate tendency to create that spatial illusion?
That is a deep question to ponder. Real versus illusion in mixing. Could knowing that actually change how you hear your favorite albums from now on? Definitely something for you to think about.